Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. There's a story that came out October 7th that I didn't get the chance to talk about that I actually want to talk about because I think it's interesting. This is New York Times, actually. The resistance raising big money upends liberal politics. Now, what the story essentially boils down to is, I would say the argument being made is that you have these new groups that are further to the left, let's call it a new left, raising money and going after these other groups that are entrenched democratic establishment. I've been screaming that there's going to be a civil war in 2020, and this article is making the point that the civil war is starting right now. Now, I'm going to read part of this because I think it's interesting, and I kind of want to make a point about it. In fact, let me make my point first. Look, the article is making this point. Look, there's a new left. That new left is trying to raise money. That new left doesn't necessarily want to take money from certain sources, or at least not have most of its money come from those sources, because that it wants to be able to deal with certain issues, college, healthcare, et cetera, increasing Social Security, those type of things. Think of a Sanders type platform. Whereas you have this entrenched democratic establishment that doesn't necessarily want those things to change. And these two things are warring in some way to see who can get these donors. It's interesting. The thought is there's this fight for what it means to be the left in this country. I've been screaming that this was the case. I've been screaming that in 2020 there will be an immense civil war. And they're making the point that, again, the civil war starts now. And it goes beyond just Sanders and Clinton. I mean, it's not just people squabbling with one another. We're talking about money going behind candidates and going behind trying to define what it means to be the left. Even going so far as some donors saying, hey, we may sit this one out until they make a decision on what they're going to be. It's interesting. The point I want to make is your issue here is money and politics. Your issue is capitalism. Let's be honest. But just shy of that, your issue is money and politics. Now, the reason I say that is Republicans don't have any issue whatsoever taking money and doing favors for the money. They're obsequious to cash. That's who they are. But as a Democrat, that is not your philosophical basis. Meaning you're stuck in this kind of quagmire, this Chinese finger trap. How are you going to get money, which is required to win elections, but at the same token be true to your base? Be true to what you are philosophically supposed to be. How do you do both? How do you dance on the head of that pin? Meaning you have a base that's completely antagonistic towards this kind of cash, this idea, because that base understands that this money is an investment. It's not you're giving this money free of strings. If you require money to get elected, which you do, Hillary Clinton raised $1 billion. If the people who you're calling for that money, they're giving you this money as an investment. Now, you're spending all of your time calling these people, and you're telling us we're supposed to believe that your integrity is so superhuman that when they call you on the phone that you don't pick up. We're supposed to believe that. When they send a message to your secretary or to whoever, you're not going to hear that call. And more than that, when you're in that office, you're going to do things, or you're not going to do things that are adversely going to affect their interests. Meaning at times where the interests of the people who are paying you collide with the interests of the people in the public itself, you will likely, if history, follows, you're going to lean to the people who are giving you the cash. If you do something in that office, like I said, if you need money to win elections, which is true, and if you do something in that office that's going to be antagonistic or adversely affects those people who are giving you that money, do you believe that they're going to give you the money again? The answer is no. The answer is no. You're dancing on the head of a pin. Your base is going to require you to do things that is going to be antagonistic against the interests of the people who are giving you the money, against the plutocrats. Your base greatly dislikes plutocrats. So how are you going to get their votes? How are you going to convince your base that it's okay to vote for you, knowing full well that you're taking all of these investments from people who are giving you this cash, all of these investments? How do you do it? How do you do it? I would wager that the reason why Democrats lose so much is because the country understands that the left is supposed to be something fundamentally different than what you are. That's what I think. Now, the reason why it's fundamentally different than what you are is because you're obsequious to the people who give you the cash, just like Republicans are obsequious to the people who give them the cash. Both of you are bought. The difference is your philosophical basis is different. Who you're supposed to be representing is different. And you have a grassroots, a base full of people that hate your guts and despise you for what you've become. How do you get elected when your base dislikes you, distrusts you, thinks you have no legitimacy at all in regards to being the left in this country? How do you win elections? How do you win elections when you no longer have a base that considers itself your base? I would wager you don't win elections in that way. You lose. And you have lost magnificently. You've lost magnificently. Now, the new left takes this position of, we want universal health care. We want universal college. That is the bare bones of what we want. Yes, there's probably going to be more, but at the very least, that's a starting point. So these guys are out there pushing for this. Now, here's the catch. Here's the catch. Politicians are public relations agents to some degree. They manage the affairs of the people who are giving them cash with the lower class, meaning the 99%. And they have to make this argument to the upper crust. Give me the cash. Give me the cash. Yes, we're going to raise taxes in this case because we need to pay for universal health care. And yes, we're going to push for college, meaning yes, we're going to tag you for taxes to some degree because we need to pay for these programs. But you're not going to get anybody in that office otherwise, meaning I'm the best that you can get. The public has raised this consciousness just a smidgen to the point of recognizing that each and every person in this country should at the very least have health care, and each and every person should be able to go to school and better themselves. Sucks for you. That's all. That's the least they're willing to accept now. So you either take me and still see that some of your interests get served, or allow the batshit crazy Republicans in that office. Meaning you don't win until you do this, or allow this. Meaning, yes, you're going to give me cash, and yes, I'm going to do this. You don't have a choice. You can't win otherwise, meaning I can't get into office otherwise. That's the conversation. The last group of Democrats, the third way Democrats, the corporatists, the neo-libs, never wanted to have that conversation. They believed their strategy was we could take all the money that we want, and they have nowhere else to go. Now, what that means is they're so arrogant that they didn't protect unions. They didn't protect the vote in regards to African Americans in one of these states after the next. And guess what bit them in the ass? The gutting of the union support and the gutting of the African American vote. Good job. You didn't protect your flank, and you lost everything. House, Senate, Supreme Court. You wanted to be able to at least hold the presidency because you thought that, well, we could hold the presidency. You didn't do that. You didn't even do that. Whatever the new left is going to be, the new left is going to have to deal with one major issue: money and politics. Until you gut that issue, you're always going to have oligarchs nipping at your heels. You're always going to have them putting massive amounts of cash against any candidate that you should put up. And you're always going to have this situation where you're fighting, I don't want to say necessarily a losing battle, but you're fighting a battle with a large amount of cash aligned against you. Money politics is your issue. Everybody hates it. Left, right, and center. Everybody hates it. Politicians in office don't mind it because it greases their pockets. Everybody else hates it. The average American citizen, if you're talking to them, they hate the fact that money is in politics. That should be part of your platform. That should be a major part of your platform. Left, right, or center. Get money out of politics. If we're going to have a conversation, if we're going to have a debate, that debate should be something of us. Not because the candidate is being prodded based upon the cash that candidate is getting. Comes out and lies through his teeth, knowing full well that somebody's stuffing money in his G-string. That should not be a part of American politics. We can have these ideological struggles. It should not have anything to do with cash. The New York Times writes the story as if it's, oh, these guys are battling for dollars. Never once asking the question of, should it be okay that politicians can be bribed in this way? Doesn't come up in the article. Doesn't come up once. The entire article is all these guys are raising big money. But the fundamental question never comes up of, wait a minute, is it okay that these guys are making investments? They even call it investment in the article. One of the guys, the article's long, so I can't necessarily go through the article, but they even make this point that to some degree, these are investments. These are investments. George Soros in one of these things saying, it's an investment. We should invest in these younger guys, in these other groups. Let me read the beginning of the article. It started as a scrappy grassroots protest movement against Donald Trump, but now the so-called resistance is attracting 6- and 7-figure checks from major liberal donors, posing as insurgent challenge to some of the left's most venerable institutions and the Democratic Party itself. The jockeying between groups, donors, and operatives for cash and turf is occurring mostly behind the scenes, but it has grown acrimonious at times, with upstarts complaining they are being boxed out by a liberal establishment that they say enables the sort of democratic timidity that paved the way for the Trump presidency. They're right, by the way. They're right. If Chris Hayes, there's this awesome scene where Chris Hayes is asking Tom Perez. Tom Perez and Bernie Sanders are sitting side by side. Bernie Sanders has just finished screaming about the plutocrats on our backs and all this other stuff, and they asked Tom Perez, and Tom Perez, Chris, I think this is a false choice. Tom Perez backed away, set himself on fire, and ran out the building screaming. He could not have that conversation about class. Couldn't have it. The timidity that they're talking about here is in part because, again, this quagmire, or this platypus of sorts that the party has become, where it has the balance, this thing between I'm getting all of this money of investments, meaning I need to do what these people are telling me, otherwise I'm not getting this money again, versus a base that hates their guts because they're taking the cash. So yeah, I'm not going to come out of my mouth and say anything about the plutocrats and rich on their backs and all this other stuff because they won't give me the money anymore. So yeah, they're timid. They're timid. The tug-of-war, more than a lingering squabbles between supporters of Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders of Vermont, foreshadows a once-in-a-generation reorganization of the American left that could dictate the tactics and ideology of the Democratic Party for years to come. If the newcomers prevail, they could pull the party further to the left, leading it to embrace policy positions like those advocated by Sanders, including single-payer health care and free college tuition. Now, the catch becomes, I do think there's a reorganization of the left. I do think, at the very least, if people take my position of you're not getting our vote if you're not going to represent our interests, the left has no choice but to change in this way. In this case, you do have these squabbles and these things battling, trying to get position and everything else. I mean, this article is probably talking about Justice Democrats, if we're being honest, and brand new Congress and those type of groups. They're being bribed. They're being bribed. Ultimately, that's what it boils down to. They're being bribed. The Democratic functionaries, establishment, the neo-libs, whatever you want to call them, they're being bribed. And ultimately, they take cash and do favors for the money that they get. They would never say that. They would say their campaign donations and everything else. But when you look at the results of those votes, they lean a particular way. And it's not in the direction of the American public and the people who they're begging and scraping for votes. So I don't know this, whether or not they can be taken down by these new groups. I don't know. My position doesn't change with any of this. You represent my interests or you don't get my vote. And I suggest that whether these guys are fighting for dollars, fighting for bribery and everything else, is like, that's funny. Yeah, it's like two erotic dancers or two strippers on stage, battling to get the attention and the dollars of the people who are stuffing money in their G-string in their pocket. I imagine the Democratic Party bending over and somebody rubbing a credit card through their ass cheeks. That's what this looks like to me. Who has the prettiest dress? Who can I bribe the most? Now, at the very least, I agree that the new left is trying to drag the party further to the left. So fair enough. I do agree with that. I think their intentions are earnest. But they are being bribed. If the new left is going to do anything, they need to attack this idea of money in politics. And I would argue that the right should also attack this idea of money in politics. If nothing else, if we disagree on 99% of the items that come up, the very thing that we should agree on is get money out of politics. The last thing that should be affecting the debate is how much money is going into these people's pockets. That's my position. Whatever the new left is going to do, that should be part of the process. In fact, that should be the main process. And look, like I said, man, you'll get people who are on the right who will also agree with this. That should be a united front. They can disagree about anything else. Fair enough. But unless you're making the case that money should dictate the behavior of politicians, then at the very least you should agree with me. Cash should not be a part of our political process. I will leave it at that. And look, don't get me wrong, I don't mind so much if the average citizen says, okay, I want to give this particular person a few bucks. I'm talking about public funded elections. The money that these guys get should be public funded. Us, as citizenry, should make our vote based upon the ideas of the individual who are running, not so much on who can dwarf out the other person with millions and millions and millions up to $1 billion. At that point, it's not politics. It's not even who has the best ideas. It's not even who has good ideas. It's just who can swamp out the competition. Who can swamp out the competition. Our elections should be publicly funded. If individuals want to give a certain amount for a price thing, fair enough, whatever. But it should not be this thing where these foreign bodies should be able to give all of this cash. By foreign bodies, I mean foreign to our political system. And I'm talking about corporate interests, plutocrats, and all this other stuff. If the plutocrat wants to give $2,000, fair enough. Fair enough. But none of this super PACs and stuff like that, that stuff is insanity. That stuff is insanity. You're essentially just buying politicians at that point. I will leave it at that. Get money out of politics. Get money out of politics. If you're a lefty, if you're progressive, you need money out of politics. You don't want to get into this thing where you're fighting on their terms of how much money can I raise, because you are fundamentally going to change who you are in order to raise that money. That's what I'm getting at. You're stuck with the same quagmire that they're stuck with. Either you change the system in its entirety, or you're going to be continuously fighting on these things of who can raise the most cash. Don't fight on those terms. If you can drag yourself into office, that need to be the thing that you attack. And you need to join hands with the people on the right who are also screaming about money being in politics. United front. Find issues where you agree with the right on. This is one of those things. It's one of those things. I will leave it at that. This video went a little long. I hope I made my point though. As long as I'm winding as I think this video is probably going to turn out. So, alright guys. I hope you enjoy the content. Feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks everyone.